Lieutenant James Walsh stood at the edge of the coral strip as the aircraft came in too fast, too flat, and far too late. The bent-wing fighter slammed onto the runway, bounced once, twice, then lurched sideways toward the coconut palms before the pilot wrestled it straight and skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust and burnt rubber. Walsh didn't need the mechanics shouting to know what it was. An F4U Corsair. It looked wrong sitting there. The nose was impossibly long. The cockpit shoved so far back it seemed like an afterthought. The wings bent downward and then sharply upward, like a gull frozen mid-beat. From certain angles, it didn't look like a fighter at all. More like a mistake someone had been too proud to cancel. The Navy already had. Too many carrier crashes. Too many pilots killed on landing. The Corsair had earned a reputation before it ever met the enemy. Now the Marines had inherited 200 of them, and nobody was sure which would kill more pilots, the Japanese or the airplane itself. Walsh had flown F4F Wildcats for 8 months. He'd lost 2 to 0s and survived both. The Wildcat was slow, chunky, honest. It warned you before it stalled. It talked to you. This thing looked like it kept secrets. Sergeant Tony Russo, a Detroit mechanic who had been keeping fighters flying since Guadalcanal, spat tobacco juice into the coral and shook his head. 2,000 horsepower, he muttered. 4 tons empty. 650s with 400 rounds each. On paper, it's a monster. He looked at the Corsair again. In real life, it wants to murder you. The pilot climbed down from the cockpit on shaking legs. Lieutenant Bobby Chun, 23, San Francisco. It had been his first flight in the Corsair. He'd stalled twice on approach, bounced 3 times on landing. Another second, and it would have flipped, crushed him, and added one more name to the training accident list. For pilots already dead. Not shot down. Not lost in combat. Killed by the airplane. The next morning, the heat arrived early and hard. 95 degrees by 7. Breathing felt like drowning. Major Gregory Boyington gathered the squadron under the palms they used for briefings. He was already famous, already drinking too much, already exactly the man you wanted leading a unit flying a machine like this. Boyington had flown with the Flying Tigers. He knew the Zero, knew its pilots, knew how they fought. They're artists, he said flatly. Ballet dancers with machine guns. They'll outturn you every time. They'll climb faster. They'll laugh if you try to dogfight them. He paused, letting that sink in. So don't. The Zero was light, fragile, built for finesse. The Corsair was brute force, weight, horsepower, momentum. It could dive faster than anything in the Pacific. 450 miles per hour straight down. The Zero's wings would come off at 350. Use the dive, Boyington said. 1 pass. 1 kill. Fire, climb, repeat. If you turn with them, you're dead. If they force you to turn, he smiled. You were dead already. 3 days later, reconnaissance photos came back from Bougainville. Dozens of Zeros at Kahili. Dozens more at Balao. But something else stood out. Young faces. Midway and Guadalcanal had killed the best of Japan's naval aviators. These were replacements. Still dangerous. Still well-trained. But not the masters who had humiliated the Americans in 1942. Walsh spent his days learning to survive the Corsair. Takeoff tried to kill you. If you didn't lock the tail wheel, it would ground loop. If you didn't lead with right rudder, torque would flip you. Get the tail up too slow, and you were blind. Too fast, and you were dead. The stall was worse. No warning buffet. One moment you were flying. The next, the world was spinning toward jungle and sea. Landing required faith. You couldn't see the runway until the last seconds. You flew the pattern from memory and dropped it in blind, hoping physics stayed on your side. But when it worked, when you climbed to 25,000 feet and pushed the nose over, it felt like riding lightning. The airspeed needle wound past 300, 350, 400. At 400 miles per hour, you covered a mile every 9 seconds. The Zeros below looked frozen. The guns were everything. 6 M2 Brownings, 3 in each wing, converging at 300 yards. Russo's crew had bore-sighted them perfectly. At convergence, all 6 streams met in a space the size of a dinner plate. 24 pounds of lead per second. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds burning hot enough to ignite vapor and melt aluminum. The Japanese called it golden fireworks. They stopped joking when those fireworks cut their friends in half. June 30th, 1943, first combat mission. 16 Corsairs lifted off to escort bombers to Munda. Walsh's hands shook as he pushed the throttle forward. 2,000 horsepower surged through the airframe. The airplane fought him every inch of the runway before finally deciding to fly. At altitude, the heat vanished. Sweat froze in his suit. Oxygen masks iced over. The Corsair didn't care. Crossing New Georgia at 25,000 feet, Chin's voice came over the radio. Zeros. 2 o'clock high. Walsh looked up. Sunlight flashed off aluminum. 15, maybe 20 zeros, 3,000 feet above. Perfect attack position. Boyington's voice was calm. Nobody turns. When they dive, we dive straight down. The zeros peeled off in pairs, elegant and deadly. Tracers floated past Walsh's canopy. Red balls of light. 20mm cannon rounds. One hit would tear a hole you could put your head through. Walsh shoved the stick forward. The Corsair went nose down into a 70-degree dive. 300. 350. 400. The zero behind him shrank in the mirror. At 350 it gave up. Any faster, and its wings would rip free. Walsh pulled out at 5,000 feet. 6, 7 GS crushed him into the seat. His vision grayed. The Corsair groaned, but held. Chin wasn't as lucky. A cannon round blew through his wing. Hydraulic fluid streamed out. No flaps. He'd have to land fast. Walsh followed him down, watching aluminum peel away. Chin hit the runway at 135. No brakes. No flaps. He ground-looped, cartwheeled, and stopped 50 feet from the jungle. Alive. They lost 2 pilots that day. Not to enemy fire. The Corsair was still collecting its price. By mid-July, the Japanese had stopped underestimating the bent-wing fighter. They still hated it. Still called it ugly. Still believed the Zero was the superior machine in a turning fight. But hatred had replaced laughter, and caution had replaced arrogance. July 16, 1943, fighter sweep over Bougainville. 16 Corsairs climbed to 28,000 feet before leveling off. Below them, 40 Zeros lifted from Kahili airfield, engines straining as they clawed for altitude. The Japanese pilots expected Wildcats or P-40s, aircraft that would meet them halfway. They did not expect Americans already above them. Boyington's plan was brutally simple. Altitude was ammunition. Spend it carefully, never all at once. Pairs dove, others stayed high. As one pair climbed away, another fell through the sky like dropped knives. Walsh picked a Zero climbing through 18,000 feet. The pilot saw him too late, just a silver blur growing rapidly larger. Walsh fired at 300 yards. The convergence was perfect. 6 streams of .50 caliber fire met just ahead of the cockpit. The first round shattered the engine block. The next punched through the canopy. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds detonated inside the fuel system. The Zero didn't burn. It vanished. Walsh pulled up hard, 8 GS crushing his chest as the Corsair rocketed back toward altitude. When he looked down, there was nothing falling. No wreckage, no smoke trail. Just empty sky. Deleted. The Japanese pilots adapted quickly. 1 Zero dove away as Walsh approached, using the Corsair's own tactic. Walsh followed, careful not to commit too deeply. At the last moment, the Zero pilot chopped throttle and dropped full flaps. The Corsair screamed past at 400 miles an hour. For 10 seconds, the Zero had a shot. Then Walsh firewalled the throttle and pulled straight up. The Corsair climbed like it was attached to a cable. The Zero followed briefly, then stalled at 60 degrees and fell away. They landed that day with fuel gauges on empty and gun barrels burned white. 7 Zeros destroyed. No Corsairs lost. The Japanese pilots started calling the aircraft Shinin no Sure, whistling death for the sound it made in those dives, a rising scream that ended lives before warning could reach the brain. But victory came at a cost. Chin's hands shook constantly now. Not fear, adrenaline damage. Walsh had dropped 30 pounds. His body was burning itself alive to survive repeated 8 and 9G pulls. The squadron doctor, Captain Aaron Weinstein, was blunt. The human body isn't built for this. Blood vessels rupture. Organs shift. Every mission ages you a month. September 1943, Rebel. Intelligence reported over 100 Zeros massing near Simpson Harbor. The range was a problem. Rebel sat at the edge of the Corsair's combat radius. Boyington had a solution. Drop tanks. Belly tanks welded on overnight. Dangerous. Unstable. Leaking fuel at altitude. But they gave just enough range. At dawn, 24 Corsairs lifted into gray sky, engines straining under the extra weight. Walsh's aircraft felt wrong, sluggish, angry. Fuel streamed from the tank into the slipstream. One spark would turn him into a fireball. At 25,000 feet, the temperature fell to 40 below zero. Ice formed on the wings. Below them, Rabaul appeared, ships in the harbor, smoke columns rising. And above it all, Zeros. At least 100, stacked from 15 to 25,000 feet. Waiting. Drop tanks, Boyington ordered. Walsh pulled the release. The tank fell away, tumbling into jungle. Instantly, the Corsair felt alive again. The Japanese didn't climb to meet them. They spread out, layering altitude, forcing the Americans to pass through multiple bands of fighters. Smart. Boyington climbed higher. 30,000 feet. The Zeros couldn't follow. Their engines starved for oxygen. Then the Corsairs attacked, not as one wave, but in rotation. For diving, 20 covering. Endless pressure from above. Walsh's turn came in the third wave. He pushed over. 400. 420. 440. A Zero snapped left, trying to evade. Walsh fired. 2 seconds. The Zero's wing folded, then the other. The fuselage spun wildly, pilot trapped inside. Walsh pulled out at 8,000 feet, vision tunneling as blood fled his brain. Below him, the sky burned. Lieutenant Frank Patterson tried to turn with a Zero. 10 seconds later, he was dead. Lieutenant Tom Morrison got boxed in by 3 Zeros and rammed the nearest one. Both aircraft exploded. "Tell my sister happy birthday," Morrison said over the radio. His last words. The battle lasted 12 minutes. When Boyington ordered withdrawal, Walsh had 60 rounds left per gun. Fuel for 30 minutes. Their base was 40 miles away. They diverted to Treasury Island. Chen ran out of fuel first. Calm voice. Engine quitting. Going in. He ditched at 90 miles an hour. The Corsair skipped, submarined, sank. Chen surfaced with his pistol. Sharks circled. A Catalina picked him up 3 hours later. Walsh's engine quit on final approach. He was going to hit the trees. Jimmy Stewart, math teacher turned fighter pilot, did something impossible. He dove beneath Walsh's powerless Corsair, waggled his wings, and created just enough turbulent lift to carry Walsh over the treeline. The Corsair slammed onto the runway, gear collapsing, sliding 800 feet on its belly. Walsh climbed out shaking. Score for the day, 31 Zeros destroyed. Cost, 8 Corsairs lost. 5 pilots dead. A victory they could not afford to repeat. That night, Walsh's hands would not stop shaking. Not fear. Something deeper. After Rabaul, something inside Walsh went quiet. Not fear. Fear had burned out months earlier. What vanished was the part of him that reacted. The part that felt surprise, anger, triumph. Combat became mechanical, altitude, speed, angles, bursts. Kill, climb, repeat. October 1943. The Japanese adapted again. No more large formations at altitude. Now they flew low, in small groups, hiding in cloud layers and weather fronts, forcing the Corsairs down where turning mattered. The Marines adapted too. 8 plane flights instead of 4. Half diving, half covering. Someone always above, someone always fast. Sleep became another enemy. Night raids. Lone bombers slipping through at treetop height. Air raid sirens, sometimes real, sometimes not. 3 hours of sleep if you were lucky. Exhaustion made mistakes. Mistakes got pilots killed. Lieutenant Roger White forgot to check his 6 during a dive on October 15th. The Zero was exactly where doctrine said it would be. Cannon rounds walked up his fuselage. The armor plate bought him seconds. One shell slipped between plates. White landed his Corsair, died as the crew tried to pull him from the cockpit. His last words were about Oregon rain. October 20th. Walsh almost died. 12 Zeros hidden in a cloud bank at 8,000 feet. The first warning was tracers passing his canopy. 20 millimeters red fire. He broke hard left. G-suit inflating. Vision graying. The Zero stayed with him. Veteran pilot. Patient. No overshoot. Walsh tried everything. Barrel rolls, chandelles, split S. The Zero matched him move for move, closing. Walsh pushed the stick forward. Negative G weightless. Then slammed against the canopy. Blood rushed to his head. Eyes felt like they would burst. The Corsair inverted and fell straight down. The Zero hesitated. Half a second. Enough. Walsh pulled through, came up behind the Zero, fired one burst. The engine exploded. Walsh flew home tasting copper. Internal bleeding. 2 weeks grounded. 2 weeks of funerals. By November, the Corsair was winning the air war and destroying its pilots. Chin developed ulcers. Kowalski's hair went gray at 24. Walsh dropped to 130 pounds. The doctor said their bodies were consuming muscle because adrenaline had replaced sleep and food. November 11th, 1943, Armistice Day. Walsh thought of his father in France in 1918. The war to end all wars. The lie of it. That mission over Rabaul, a Zero deliberately rammed Stuart's Corsair. No mistake. No desperation maneuver. Choice. Both aircraft exploded. The math teacher from Kansas, who had saved Walsh's life with turbulence calculations, was gone in a blink. Something inside Walsh snapped cleanly. He dove on the next Zero without thought. Fired. Killed. Climbed. Picked another. Fired again. 5 kills that day. Ace in a day. Boyington slapped his back. The squadron cheered. Walsh felt nothing. December 17th, 1943, the final push. 200 Japanese aircraft attacked Rabaul, the largest battle of the Solomon campaign. 16 Corsairs met 40 fighters escorting 30 bombers. The sky became a vertical maze, diving, climbing, exploding aircraft everywhere. Walsh's guns overheated. Barrels glowed red. An ammunition can detonated in his left wing, tearing a 3-foot hole. He kept flying. Chen took a 20mm hit through the engine. Oil covered his windscreen. He flew blind by instruments, calling positions until the engine seized. He bailed out under fire. Walsh put his Corsair between Chun and a pursuing Zero. Cannon rounds hammered his armor plate like sledgehammers. The plate held. Kowalski killed the Zero from above. They saved Chun. Lost 5 Corsairs. Killed 18 Zeros and 12 bombers. Victory. Walsh flew 3 more missions afterward like a machine. On December 23rd, his body quit. He climbed into the cockpit and couldn't remember how to start the engine. Sat there for 2 hours, hands on familiar controls, mind empty. The crew chief found him crying without knowing why. Combat fatigue. He'd flown 138 missions. He was supposed to go home after 50. They sent him to Australia. Clean sheets. Real food. Nurses who smiled. Walsh felt like a ghost. 2 weeks later, Chin arrived. Ulcers bleeding so badly he'd been vomiting blood in his cockpit. They sat together without speaking. Nothing to say. Commander Sarah Goldstein, Navy psychiatrist, arrived in January. She threw away their sedatives. "You need to feel it," she said, "or it will eat you alive." She made them talk, not about kills or tactics, but about Stuart's students, Morrison's sister, White's reign. Slowly, Walsh remembered he was human. February 1944. The Corsair was officially redesignated. No longer a failure. Now the premier Marine fighter bomber. Kill ratio, 11-1. Walsh received orders home. Training command. He stood on the dock in San Francisco, uniform hanging loose. His mother cried. His father just nodded. One veteran to another. At Pensacola, Walsh trained new pilots. He taught them how to survive the Corsair, how to respect it, how to fear it just enough. "Never turn with a Zero," he said. "And never forget the airplane wants to kill you too." One trainee reminded him of Stuart. Walsh rode him harder than anyone, trying to save him. The kid became an ace, then got shot down. Survived. Luck or skill? Walsh never knew which mattered more. August 1945. Hiroshima. Nagasaki. The war ended. Walsh felt everything and nothing at once. He went home to Pittsburgh. Became an accountant. Married a woman who didn't ask questions. Had 2 children. Named his son James Stuart Walsh. Never explained why. Walsh died in 2001. At the funeral, his son found a box in the attic. Letters from trainees, photos from the Russell Islands, a list of names, and a defused Japanese 20mm shell. A note attached. "This one had my name on it. Stuart got in the way. Pass it on." The F4U Corsair flew on, in Korea, even Vietnam. The bent-wing bird nobody wanted became the longest-serving piston fighter in history. Statistics say 2,300 enemy aircraft destroyed. Kill ratio 11-1. Statistics don't count ulcers, gray hair at 24, shaking hands, or friends who never came home. The Corsair won the air war. The cost was measured in humanity, and those who flew it carried that cost for the rest of their lives.